We thought we would talk to you guys about RV slides. Most RVs have them these days, and there's actually quite a bit to them.
So RV slides are also known as slide outs or pop outs or bump outs, and what they basically do is they allow more space in the RV. They allow for more floor space, more storage space, and they also give you a lot more layout options inside the RV, as well as cut down that feeling that you're living in a hallway. They also allow for more windows and more light to get into the RV.
That all may sound great, but there are some cons to slides as well. Obviously, you can't drive with them out, so they have to come in every time. And when they're in, you can't always get at everything. Sometimes things get blocked by the slides. Even sometimes heat ducts get blocked. So if you're trying to use it while it's closed up, you might have some issues.
We had an RV at one point that when the slides were in, you couldn't open the refrigerator.
Also, slides can possibly have more mechanical problems, so that's definitely a con. And you have to be more weather cognizant, because with the slides out, you extend the size of the RV, so you're going to be more susceptible to wind and rain and other weather events.
And on top of that, they are less insulated than, say, your RV floor or your ceiling, and so they do kind of make your RV less efficient. And with the more material and mechanical things that need to go into the slides, you'll generally find that RVs with slides are a little bit more expensive than RVs without slides.
So RV slides have been around since really the 70s when you first started to see them, 70s and 80s, but they didn't really become commercially available in most RVs until the mid-90s.
And now you pretty much see them on all RVs.
There's basically two types of RV slides. There's a direct electrical system slide where you actually have a motor and a gear or a cable that drives the slide out directly from the electric motor, or you have a hydraulic type slide where you have an electric motor still that's driving a hydraulic pump and uses hydraulic fluid to actually drive rams to push the slides in and out.
We have hydraulic slides on our RV, if you're curious.
You also see in RVs different types of slides, some that just go straight out, and there's actually going to be like a little lip because they don't move at all. The floor has to raise up. You have to step up into them. Or you'll sometimes see flush mount slides. We actually have one flush mount and two straight slides on ours, and the flush mount will go out and set down, and it's flush with the floor, so you can walk out onto it just like your normal flooring. There are other types of slide systems. Sometimes you actually see a slide within a slide. I've seen a lot of manufacturers do some crazy things with slides, but for the most part, they just are boxes that push out of the RV. So of the two slide drive systems, some common systems that you'll see today on RVs of electric drive systems are systems like the Schwintek system, which is a cog and a gear. The motor actually turns a gear, and there's rails. You can see rails on the outside of the slides that hold it in place, and it drives it directly with motors in the wall. Or the AccuSlide system, which has a cable system, which is on the inside of the wall, and it drives it in and out. Lippert makes a handful as well, which drive gears directly underneath, similar to a hydraulic system. Hydraulic systems are made primarily by Lippert, but a lot of other manufacturers also make their own, and they're pretty much usually the same. They have a big ram that just pushes the slide in and out, and a system of gears that keeps the slide straight when it's going in and out.
So now let's talk about the pros and cons of the electric drive systems versus the hydraulic. On the electric side, you'll find that those are usually less expensive, they're lighter weight and less complicated in general. You'll usually always see that you have individual buttons for each one of your slides. And usually you can override them pretty easily if something goes wrong with the slide system.
Some of the cons of electric slides, however, are that usually they're not as reliable on larger slides. In fact, we have some friends that have a Schwintek system on a full-length Class A slide, and it just couldn't hold up over time, so we had to rebuild it. Some of the slide systems as well don't allow the slides to go all the way out. When they have the cable system on the inside of the wall, you actually lose a couple inches of the slide, which is also a drawback. They're also a lot slower than the hydraulic slides.
So the pros of the hydraulic slide system are that they're basically the opposite of the cons of the electric system. They're much more powerful, so they're much better at moving some of those large, long profile slides in RVs that you see these days. They're typically more reliable in the long run, and they move in and out much faster than the electrical slides.
Cons to the hydraulic slides are that they're typically a more complicated system because you've got a lot of hydraulic lines run around a lot of places. On a less expensive hydraulic slide system, you typically only have one button that controls all the different slides. Like one slide will go out, then the other, then another one. And if you're going to have multiple buttons for each slide, it makes the system more complicated with the valving and hydraulic fluid and stuff like that. Also, if something goes wrong with the hydraulic system, you get a leak or something happens with one of the piston, that can be very difficult to override, and you basically have to fix the system before you can get the slides in or out again.
So if you're not familiar with operating RV slides, there's a couple of things to consider when you are opening and closing them. One of the things, obviously, is to make sure that the area that they're moving to is free and clear. This means checking to make sure nothing has fallen behind the slide, maybe in transit, or there's nothing that it's going to hit on its way in. This could include cabinet doors. Make sure those are all shut and secure, because you don't want those opening and then getting stuck, because once those slides get going, and if you don't notice, you could really cause some damage to the thing that's caught, as well as overstressing the slide system itself. Another thing to consider is that when you're opening and closing an RV, what you're basically doing is you're drawing more air inside when you're opening it. So you don't want to open your RV slides when all the windows and all the doors are closed, because what you're basically doing is creating difference in pressure, and you can pop a seal on like a window or something, and that's really not good. So just make sure you like prop open your door while you're opening it up, and same for when you're pushing the slides back in. You want to have a space for that air to move out of the RV.
On a lot of RVs, you will see something on top of the slide called an awning topper, and it's basically like an awning that retracts and extends with the slide, and it covers the top of the slide to prevent things from getting on top of it. There's some pros and cons to these systems. Some of the pros are that it obviously does that. It keeps things from getting on top of the slide, like debris, leaves, pine needles, things like that. So you don't have to crawl up on your roof and clean the slide off before you close it up every time.
We had an RV where we didn't have slide toppers, and we bring the slides in not realizing that there was a whole bunch of leaves in there. So you end up getting leaves all over the place in the RV.
They also help keep the slides cool because, again, they're not quite as insulated as your RV roof. This keeps the sun off. Our RV that we have now has slide toppers, and the slides are considerably cooler. It also helps with keeping the water off. There's a less leak potential because the water's not even getting onto the slide if it's raining. And it makes them quieter too, because the rain's hitting that awning and running off instead of pounding on the roof of the slide.
Along those lines, though, when you're talking about precipitation, you do have to watch those toppers to make sure that water doesn't accumulate up there and pool and sag that awning topper. Same thing goes for snow. You got to keep the toppers themselves clear from getting stretched out. Another thing that is maybe not so great about the awning toppers is wind, and that's probably one of our biggest complaints about the awning toppers, is that there's really no great way to keep your awning toppers from flapping like crazy when you are in high wind situations. And this can be very, very loud. Actually, when we're in high wind situations, it is not uncommon for us to bring in our slides that are getting hit by the wind, because it's so loud, and we've got one right over our bed, because our bedroom is a slide, that we can't sleep at night if we leave it out.
Slide toppers are also just one more thing to maintain. You know, they can possibly tear, and you'd have to keep up on them and replace them. They can also cause some problems. Our friends had some like ice buildup on them, and when they went to put their slide out, it jammed up the slide and got the slide crooked and did some damage. So definitely pros and cons to having slide toppers, but we have them on our current RV. We're in mostly warm weather, and we really like having them.
Definitely. So let's talk about RV slide maintenance. Since they're mechanical, you're going to want to make sure you keep up with them so that they last for a very long time without any major mishaps. So first thing that you can easily do is to make sure that all the moving metal on metal parts in your slide system are well greased. We like to use a white lithium spray grease, which seems to work pretty well. So we do that quite regularly, actually.
You're also going to want to make sure and check that the slides are properly aligned every so often, and that means making sure that when they come in, they they're flush against the RV all the way around, and when they're out, they're flush on the inside trim that touches the wall. The slides can get out of alignment a little bit over time. They can their weight can cause them to sag a little bit. They can, you could accidentally hit something like a tree or a rock or something when putting it out. That's another thing you need to think about is there clearance around your RV so that you can actually put it out without hitting anything. Or crunching something inside can also cause like something to tweak a little bit and misalign the slide. If you get a misalignment, if you don't catch it soon enough, it could just cause more damage. The gears can grind, it can get a little off kilter. We actually had one of our slides get misaligned and we were hearing the gears skip a little bit and kind of pop as it went out. It turned out that it had just sagged a little bit, and it took adjusting bolt a couple times to get it to kind of come back up, and all was well again. But if we hadn't fixed it in a reasonable amount of time, it probably could have done some serious damage over time.
Another thing that you're going to want to keep up is the weather seals. Every single slide has some weather seals to keep wind and water out from the sides of the slides and into the RV. So what you're going to want to do is use a rubber protectant or some sort of Armor All type thing to clean those weather seals pretty often. Make sure that they're not cracking or building up any debris.
Speaking of debris, like we mentioned earlier, especially if you don't have slide toppers, you're going to want to get up on your roof pretty much every time you bring the slides in and make sure you don't have debris on top of them, because that debris is going to damage those slides as it moves in and out. That's leaves, acorns, pine needles, things like that. You're going to want to make sure to keep that clear.
And even if you do have slide toppers, sometimes leaves can get wet and they get stuck on there, and then if you bring in your slides, they get rolled up in the process, so you're going to want to check those too.
If you have a flush mount slide, the slides that go out and then set down, you're going to want to make sure to keep the that piece that it slides down on is like the ramp. It's like a slippery piece that the slide slips down onto to make it flush with the rest of the floor. You want to get under there when the slide is partially out and make sure that stays clean. Dust and dirt will get in there because that's on the exterior of the RV when it's closed up. You're going to want to make sure that's clean so that it can slide in and out, because it takes a lot of force to get that slide to go up that ramp and come in if it's a flush mount slide. So that's another thing that I think a lot of people forget about.
Another thing that you might want to consider if you have hydraulic slides and a hydraulic system is if your RV is pretty old, you might want to check the hydraulic fluid and maybe do a flush. We actually just did one this past fall. Our RV is a 2005, and we just weren't sure if maybe any dirt or anything else had gotten into that fluid, so we just did a quick flush to put some fresh fluid in there. So maybe every 10-15 years, it's really not that often, but if you have an older RV, something to consider just to help maintain the life of your hydraulic system.
Another thing with slides is that it's just more roof material. You got to stay up on it, just like your RV roof. You need to make sure to caulk it every so often to keep it nice and sealed up. You have to do the same on the slides because they're out there in the weather, and I think that they're actually probably one of the most common leak sources, either failing slide seals or just people neglecting to maintain the roof on the slide itself. Another thing you need to be careful with on slides is that there's a lot of moving parts. If there's electric on the slide, which most of them have, there's going to be cables that have to move in and out with that slide, and sometimes there's guides and things to keep those cables from pinching and whatnot. You want to get under your slides every so often and make sure all of that is properly aligned. Otherwise, you could pinch. If you pinch a 120 volt line, you could cause an electrical short or a dangerous situation in your RV. Also, a lot of slides have propane on it for the fridge or the stove. That propane line, you don't want to pinch that either. So you want to make sure that all that stuff is properly free and allowed to move with the slide every so often. So we're losing our light here, so we'll wrap things up. Basically, we have slides on our RV. We have 3 of them, and I don't think that we would live without slides now that we've had them. And
no, they really open the place up. They allow so many more layout options, and comfort factor, I think, goes way up when you have slide outs.
In my opinion, large slides, like a full-length slide type of thing, I would stay away from electrical systems, although they do have a lot of pros. I've just seen a lot of them fail on those big, heavy systems. Hydraulic is probably the way to go for those systems.
We also think that you should consider where the sink is, because those pipes are susceptible to being frozen if you're planning to camp in cold weather, And if that sink is located out on a slide, those pipes might be in a less insulated area. So just something to consider if you're planning to do cold weather camping.
Also, those pipes are on the slide again, they're moving, and there's more potential for you to have a leak because of getting a pipe pinched or something like that. So we've typically stayed away from RVs that have the sink on the slide for that reason.
All right, well, we're starting to get eaten alive by mosquitoes out here, so we're going to call this a wrap. If you have any other questions about slides that we didn't get to, please leave them in the comments below. Share your stories with us too. We'd love to hear about it. And if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button and join us along for our journey.
We'll see you next time. Bye.